Right, so this is the Nations in Arms 1788 multiplayer scenario that we've come up with. Best for 4 or 5 players. Can go to 6 or 7. Under that, what's the point? So it's 10 seasons, 10 years 1788 to 1798. We use both maps. We can get away with using the 1792 income trade and maximum combat units because the research showed there's no significant difference in the economies between 88 and 92. Diplomacy, it's quite a different landscape than the French 1805 Napoleonic sort of stuff we've been used to. So, remember 7 Years' War's not so distant, plenty of people still alive from that. Catherine the Great is in power, French Revolution starting, Poland is fairly large, not as large as it once was, but quite significant. And Austria still has significant parts of the Holy Roman Empire. There's events that come out during the event phase, and they're mandatory. More about them later. I might just zip through that, but basically there's decisions to be made about politics and or armaments. Special rules, tactics cards, decided to make them purchasable rather than drawing, just to give another avenue of possibility in the yearly production. Like the 92 scenario, the French aren't very good. They don't have a +1 for their combat units. They're zeros until R23 Carnot is played, and then in 96 some of the better units can have their modifiers. Poland, there's some special rules around Poland that a power doesn't need to take Poland. In Nations in Arms, when you declare war on a minor, it's not a frivolous thing to do, because if an opposing major takes control of that minor, then you're at war not only with that minor but with its now sponsor. So things get snowballed pretty quickly. We didn't want that to happen. Historically, the Poles were pretty much left to themselves. Production, we start with £20 just to get the ball rolling, and victory points, instead of just simply the red and amber stars, give 0.1 victory points for the red tech cities. So that's because a lot of these cities were very important in 1788 and the last decade of the 1700s. And starting victory points, you can see there, and the victory level is a little bit like Empires in Arms, so it's handicapped, so some nations need less. Tried that a few times. Probably need to fine-tune that with another play or two, and then the orders of battle are set up. So we have Great Britain, small army, big fleet, nothing new there. Prussia, couple of good generals, including Brunswick. Austria, need to defend her Holy Roman Empire. A couple of fairly adequate generals. Russia with a couple of stars, Surov and Kutuzov. Big manpower. France, initially troops aren't too good and leaders, no 3-star leaders, but lots and lots of manpower, which means lots and lots of counters you can build and an economy to build it. And then Spain and so forth. And that is an overview of the rules. Just show you around the map quickly. First thing you'd be asked to do is to set up a unit. So I've just set them up here as an example. Yeah, sorry about that. So you can see here Poland's quite large, with Lithuania. It doesn't have Polesia, that can become Polish, and Russians, Kutuzov, I've put him down here. Now the first number on the combat units is the die roll modifier, second one's the artillery factors, fourth one's the morale. So guard has high morale. Most of the others are 3, militia morale 2, and there's the odd ones that morale of less. And you can see a depot unit there as well. They're used for supply. Basically, supply is 4 movement points between forts or depots. So logistics is like super important. It's a bit like US Civil War in that way, or Empires in Arms if you've played that. And Austrians, I'll put them down here. Early on, there's a decision to be made about a Russo-Turkish war and a Swedish-Russian war. Prussian-Polish issues come up early, as do trying to gobble up a lot of these German states, some of whom have these victory stars in them. So Bavaria, Hanover, Hamburg, for instance. And so they are terribly important. And of course we have the Italian provinces down here with the Spanish possessions. So that's basically the situation. The British are over here and they have the Dutch as an ally, and there's a star down in Egypt. Fairly difficult to get though. So the sequence of play is basically, if I just take that over here. So we have an event phase, and where there's cards drawn, and then we have, let me just get to the, this would be best. So let's have a look at this. So we have an event phase, then we have once a year in spring where you get some money and get to spend it, always keeping some money for diplomatic actions. It's a lot easier to get countries by diplomacy without risking war. Then there's reinforcements of those things that you've purchased. But that doesn't happen very often, just once a year. So mainly it's pretty simple. There's every turn there's diplomacy. So you have one free diplomatic effort which you can bolster with money, and then you can pay to send yet another embassy to a country and bolster that. So you can spend a lot of money on that. This is where declarations of war are made as well. Influencing major powers, Spain or Turkey. It's fairly difficult to do, but it's a great way to get in front of the game if you can get them. And then the initiative phase, where we put in counters and take them out. And basically I will see if I can show you the counter mix, because it opens up in another window. Let me just see if that's not showing, so let me just pause and bring that up. Okay, so here's the activation window. So basically what we do is we put all these chits in here and then we pull them out, and this means that all leaders with a initiative 3 or more three or less, so the 1s, 2s and 3s can move. And then if another red one comes out, it's put aside until a blue one comes. So all the blues. Now what are reds and what are blues? Typically the British are red and the French are blue, and as a nation goes from neutral, it must choose whether to move on the reds or the blues. It doesn't mean it necessarily has to be with the French. So here's 2 and 1, that would go aside. And so on. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit and see what that means, for instance. So let's say that an event happens and Russia is now at war with the Ottomans. So it's no longer neutral, so it has to choose whether to go on the blues or the reds. And the Ottomans, because France is highest in their diplomatic influence, France gets the chance to say, yes, I'll take them. So let's say they do. If they don't, then the others can die roll off for it. If no one takes it, then Russia conquers the Ottomans and reaps all the benefits. So that probably wouldn't be very smart. So let's say they're moving on reds, and French and the Turks are moving on blue. So let's say that red 1 comes out. All right. Well, that means Kutuzov's a 4 leader, so he can move on a 4, 3, 2 or 1. And this guy can move on a 3, 2 or 1. So they're going to get to move a few times because all of those are in there. In fact, Kutuzov's group, he's a 3-star general, he can have 6 steps of units, which he has here, and he can have a secondary leader and any number of depots and engineers. So let's say he chooses to move, and he goes with the depot 1, 2, 3, 4, drops the depot 5, 6. Always good to take another leader because you don't want your good leader dying in battle. And then I can activate any other leaders. So say this guy here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why 6? Because 6 is the movement of most units except cavalry and lone leaders. And then we'll bring this guy down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the end of the move there would be a siege attempt on this on Ishmael, which is a fairly good fortress, may or may not fall. Then in a later turn let's say red 3 comes up in a little while after the Turks have probably had a go before then, so maybe they've gone and picked up this guy, come back to Bucharest. They're pretty good force there, now overstacked though, so they wouldn't be able to pick that up. Stacking is very important in the game. It's the main mechanism at work. 1-star general can have 2 steps, 2-star 4, 3-star can have 6. You can buy an army counter, which case, if I just flip Kutuzov for the moment, you see he's here a 402. If you buy an army counter and they cost, I think, let's see, they cost production, army, they cost 8. We don't have a lot of money right now, so you could choose to buy one of those before the start, but if you did, then the stacking limit could be, when you turn him over, up to 16. This 1-star general, when you flip him over, you'll notice he can't do an army. So 1-star generals can't command an army. Let's look at this 2-star guy here. So what's his name? Kurazov. And he can have a small army of 8, right? So let's say he took that place. We'd mark it. Major power markers. There we are. So let's say that's Russian. Then the next turn you could move on this place, and maybe some of these other guys might come up, and so they can march to the guns or intercept if there's a fight. And then the battle system's the last thing I need to go through, and I think that's fairly good overview, ready to go from there. So let me just pause that for a second. Alright, so this is the battle procedure. It's in the Vassal, but also we have it on paper for face-to-face. So there's different tables depending on the size of the battle. You add up all the steps involved. So this is siege battles, like assaults, then minor battles and major battles. Major battles are significant in history. And you look at tactics cards, artillery superiority, +1 or +2, cavalry superiority, leaders, differential combat, the subordinate leaders must take the first casualty check, the lead unit, so the unit has a die roll modifier on it, and then if you're out of supply, that's not good, demoralised, that's not good, and the attack and then the odds that you've got. So basically, better the odds. Terrain effects, naval invasions, then defenders intercepted or failed, avoid combat. So nothing new there that we're not used to. And then both sides roll, and perhaps some leaders or some cavalry die, and determine who the winner is. Then the loser needs to see whether they're demoralised, and if they are demoralised, then there can be cavalry pursuit and more losses. We have a modification for that. It was, as designed, it was a bit rugged, but now you can placate that by having cavalry outside the battle to cover your retreat is very effective as well, particularly some light cavalry. So put the heavy cavalry into battle and the light cavalry into helping you intercept or evade or protecting your retreat path. That's pretty much where I'm going to leave it.